Keir Starmer has been accused of making Britain an unsafe place for Jewish people. Amichai Chikli accuses Labour government of being hostile, or being most hostile, Israel has ever known, claiming its base of supporters or voters are Hamas sympathisers. Oh, the irony. I'm sorry, the irony with this. Now, Chikli went as far as to call on Jewish people to leave the UK. British Jews should leave the UK unless the government changes, and the Labour Party is responsible for fueling anti-Semitism across the country. Without a dramatic change, of course, by Britain's political leadership, I see no future for Jewish life in England. Now, the reason for this insane outburst is because Labour put sanctions on two Israeli ministers, Ben Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich. Apparently, this is anti-Semitic. Now, will the media engage in a mass hysteria campaign? Will they say there's an anti-Semitism crisis in the Labour Party? Are they going to wheel out Margaret Hodge so she can attack the leader? Will there be calls for an investigation? Starmer, right, has done his utmost best to appease Israel, pretended there was a crisis under Corbyn and that he dealt with the issue. The problem is, there wasn't a widespread issue to be dealt with, but the anti-Semitism crisis went away as soon as Labour became pro-Israel, which clearly wasn't enough. This is an example that any objection to Israel gets you labelled anti-Semitic. Not all. It's hard to feel sorry for Starmer when he happily went along with the smears and kicked out all the socialists, but I want to get your reaction to this.
I think the gall to call a Labour Prime Minister who basically won through a coup via Morgan McSweeney and the Labour Together group, smearing Jeremy Corbyn as an anti-Semite, then sanctioning the most far-right politicians in the Israeli Knesset who openly call for the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, is now making it unsafe for Jewish people. Sorry, I don't quite understand it. And I think there is real danger here and I always say this, to say that Jewish people across the world, and especially in the UK, need to stand behind a systemic extermination of tens of thousands of civilians in Palestine, and that denying Israel's ability to do that is anti-Semitic, because we're already seeing the rendering down of the word anti-Semitic. And my worry is, when there's going to be real anti-Semitism, the conflation that these politicians have created with anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism is actually going to create an unsafe space for Jewish people. So they're in the process of manufacturing consent for Israel, but they are actually throwing Jewish people under the bus who will later feel unsafe when they want to speak out against any real anti-Semitism that they possibly face. And we see this with Candace Owens, we see this with Charlie Kirk, we see this with a host of different politicians on the right that are slowly weeding their rhetoric in to the UK, whom genuinely think there is a degree of Jewish control over the world. And just, I also want to state, I do find it somewhat funny that their projection of what could be a safe place for Jewish people in the UK would essentially look like a hostile environment for Muslims, pro-Palestinian activists, and an increased support for Israel. And we've seen Labour politicians like Luke Akehurst, for example, who is insanely pro-Israel, possibly create the political sphere for that. And I think that's what essentially people are looking towards to distract from this genocide that's happening in Gaza. But I think the word anti-Semitism is dangerously now becoming quite weak. And I think Jewish people genuinely are in danger, and Palestinians are going to be, they're going to be just, the genocide that's going on in Gaza is being distracted about.
I think the weaponization of anti-Semitism has become the great McCarthyite campaign of our time. It started, it's always existed to some degree. We've got former Israeli ministers saying, oh, it's a trick we literally deployed to get people to stop criticizing Israel. But it really came to the forefront under Jeremy Corbyn, and it's sort of continued on since then. We've seen it with Zohran Mamdani's campaign in America, which he won his Democratic primary. And this is a widespread thing. I'm glad you brought up the likes of Charlie Kirk and specifically Candace Owens, because I think when you smear people as anti-Semitic who aren't anti-Semitic, one, it obviously trivializes it, but I think it increases it, because you'll get people on the right wing, far right, you get people like Candace Owens who only criticize Israel because they're anti-Semitic, and you're going to get people listen to them. You're going to get people who support the Palestinian movement, and I've seen it. I've seen people share the likes of Candace Owens because they might not know her very well politically, but will see her calling out Israel, and you're building that sort of legitimacy for the right wing when they call out Israel. When they call out Israel, it's far different to when we do it. It increases anti-Semitism, but I also think as well there's an element within Zionism and Zionists is Islamophobia. And I think that you'll get the most reprehensible people, the most racist people, suddenly concerned with anti-Semitism. I mean, you're either an anti-racist or not, but for some reason it seems to be all right when you're right wing. You can just, downplay all forms of anti-Semitism all forms of racism apart from anti-Semitism. At the heart of Zionism, there is a Islamophobic play here as well, and I think that's part of why ministers in Israel want to see Gaza completely occupied because they don't want Arabs in the region as well.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point because I know you brought up Zohran Mamdani. The Islamophobic backlash he's been getting as of recently by the likes of the right in America is insane. They're talking about a second 9/11 coming. They're talking about a jihadist revolt coming. They're taking the words globalize the intifada as a Islamist supremacist movement. But it's also echoed here in the UK. With Jeremy Corbyn, he's a white man, yet his activism for Palestine got him smeared as a terrorist lover, right? Along with his diplomatic negotiations that he wanted between Northern Ireland and the Republicans and the separatists and etc., loyalists, etc., etc. However, what we've seen in real time with someone who actually is a Muslim is Moten Ali, who is the lead councillor for the Greens, and he ran on a pro-Palestine campaign. And Zionists came out the blue and they attacked him terribly. You even had the likes of Farage that went on. I can't remember. I think it was GB News or it might have been Talk TV. I can't remember. But he took a look at who was surrounding Moten Ali and he said, look, there's no women there. There's absolutely no women activists there. And Farage himself, though he doesn't speak much on Israel, when he does, he's in full support of Israel. He's like, yes, October the 7th was a tragedy, right? And Israel has the right to defend itself. So we are seeing the same tactics being played in the UK because you're right, there is an element of Islamophobia, and it goes back to even, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but the Corbyn era, where things like the Labour files and the Ford report found there was a disproportionate amount of focus within Labour MPs that were Muslim rather than actual Zionists. And I think it is because you have to manufacture consent for the state of Israel by throwing not just Jewish voices under the bus, because Corbyn did have a Jewish alliance backing him. He did genuinely have a monolith of opinions. He didn't just have a Zionist lobby. And at the same time, you have to create the scapegoat, which are Muslims or people that just love Muslims. So I think it's a really good point you made there. And I think it's only rising, especially within the UK, and we've seen with Mamdani as well.
But I think as well, I have no sympathy for Keir Starmer because he played that game. Look, and absolutely no one has said on the left, no one in Corbyn's team said there was zero anti-Semitism. That's virtually impossible, right? Every political party is going to have it. What was the lie was this crisis that, Labour was specifically anti-Semitic, which is just not true. None of the numbers suggest that. All the research shows from what we have that it's not true. But Keir Starmer went along with that lie because he thought it was politically advantageous, but also it was a way to kick out the left. And he famously said, the Labour Party has changed. If you don't like it, there's the door. And it's funny now that, once again, the Labour Party has been completely complicit in Israel's genocides, but they have obviously supported the ICC arrest warrants, or they've sanctioned Ben Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, right, on a personal capacity, by the way. They've done that, which I think is like the ultimate bare minimum. It's not even that, right? And that gets labelled Keir Starmer someone who was hostile to Jews. I don't feel sorry for him because he did that game. And I tell you what, had even Jeremy Corbyn's critics who would say, I don't like his politics that much, but had they been honest, had Keir Starmer and others around him said, look, Jeremy Corbyn, is many things. He's not anti-Semitic. We've not seen evidence that Labour Party is harbours a large chunk of anti-Semitism. And had they took on the media smears on behalf of Jeremy Corbyn, despite their political disagreements, potentially we could have defeated this lie. Because obviously, if it was people like Margaret Hodge who said, no, it's not true, I don't like Jeremy, but that's not true, the media might have would have probably taken it more seriously. But they allowed it to happen, and now it's happening to them. And I just say, fuck them. You got what you
Yeah.
sort of asked for.
Yeah, and just the last thing I want to say on it, I think it will just never be enough for Zionists. Trump isn't enough for Zionists. JD Vance isn't enough for a Zionist. Miriam Adelson, the big people that are funding and doing super PACs for Trump, aren't enough for Zionists. It will never be enough because Israel, as of right now, is increasing its capacity to systemically exterminate people, and it needs more and more support. So I think you're 100% right. You shouldn't lean into a little bit of into even a little bit of the ability to let them manufacture consent for Israel, because they'll always throw you under the bus because their aim isn't to genuinely prop you up as their favorite democratic leader.
Support independent media, support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn left.